Today we are making a family favorite, pull-apart garlic bread with cheese. And to be more specific, this is made from a focaccia bread made from scratch that's got plenty other ingredients, so stay close and watch the recipe step by step. For this recipe, I'm recommending a good strong white flour. Try something organic or something that doesn't have that many chemicals. You can use 00 Italian or you can use all-purpose flour. Just bear in mind that the texture of your focaccia will be influenced by that. And I'm using 500 grams of white flour. That's probably the sweet spot for one tray of focaccia, obviously depending on how big the tray is. I would highly recommend to sift your flour. Essentially, the purpose of sifting is to smooth it out and make it lighter for mixing with other ingredients. And this process is also breaking up any lumps they may form into the flour. Now to activate the yeast, take 1 tablespoon of flour and place it into a smaller bowl. And you have two options. You can either use fresh yeast or dry yeast. I find that dry yeast is a lot more reliable. Nothing wrong with the fresh yeast, just make sure when you use it to be as fresh as possible, otherwise you're not gonna get the best results. With 1 tablespoon of dry yeast, add half teaspoon of custard sugar. And what this does is basically feeding the yeast, making it easier to activate. Add 50 milliliters of lukewarm water. Too hot will kill the yeast, too cold will not get reactivated. There are 3 main principles you need to follow in order to bring this dry yeast to life. It needs moisture, which is the water we just added, it needs temperature, which is the temperature of the lukewarm water, and it needs time. The time we're giving, it's about 5 to 10 minutes, and after that we'll definitely know whether this yeast is alive or not. After about 10 minutes, you should see small bubbles coming at the surface. That means the yeast is activating and it starts working. If you don't see that, that means the yeast is dead. You either didn't follow the process properly or you just need to buy a different one. Now get back to the flour and into the center make a well. Add the yeast mixture and now you can combine the rest of the ingredients. Altogether we need about 230 milliliters of water. 50 from the yeast mixture and another 270 milliliters from the one we're adding now. Add 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil and 3/4 of a tablespoon of salt. Now get your hands into the bowl. This is the part that I love the most. I don't know about you, but if you don't, then you can use a food mixer. You need to make sure that the ingredients are well combined, and don't forget to add the water gradually. Knead the dough until soft and elastic, and if you decide to use a food mixer, you need about 7 minutes. If you do it by hand, you probably need about 12 to 15, but it's well worth it. Great way of stress release, you should definitely try it. You should end up with a soft and slightly sticky dough, similar with what I've got now in my hands. Add some olive oil into the bowl, and now add the dough back into the bowl. This will prevent the dough from sticking once it rises. If your kitchen is cooler, let me show you a little trick that works all the time. It might look weird, but you should definitely give it a try. Cover the dough with a duvet or with a blanket. This will give to the dough the perfect conditions of rising. This will stay covered for about an hour or until it's double in size. And now let's move on to the rest of the ingredients, starting with the garlic. 4 cloves of garlic. I'm gonna be using this for garlic butter. Chop them as fine as you can, and after that, get some salt on top and using the blade of your knife, just scrape it against the board. This should turn your garlic into a very fine paste. That's what we're looking for. As toppings, I'm gonna be using 3 ingredients: sun-dried tomatoes, 1 red onion, chop it nice and finely. If you don't have red onion, just use white, but the red one is sweeter and it works well with this recipe. After that, I have some chorizo kind of style sausage. It's got a lot of paprika, it's smoked, works well for me. Just chop it up and this will go on top as well. After about an hour, our dough should be double in size. And now knock it off and give you another 30 minutes of proofing. What many people do at this point, they just put it into the tray, give you about 15 to 20 minutes of proofing, and in the oven it goes. In my opinion, adding an extra step of proofing, it really helps and it gives the best results. Now let's make some garlic butter. Nothing complicated, simple recipe. 100 grams of butter, unsalted or very low salted, because the garlic has already enough salt from when we turn it into a paste. As we are getting closer to the baking process, make sure you preheat your oven at 220 degrees Celsius. Half an hour later, our dough got double in size again. It's easier the second time because the right temperature was already there. You don't necessarily need a non-stick tray, as long as you have the right dough consistency. Drizzle a bit of olive oil on the tray. This will prevent dough from sticking and it will give you better flavor. Stretching the dough, you could do this with a rolling pin, but you can definitely do it by hand. Try to get your dough into a flatbread kind of thing with a ½ inch thickness. There are many mistakes people do when making focaccia or bread in general, and one of the biggest one I've seen is not allowing the dough to proof properly. As you could see, we've been already through 2 stages of proofing, and this is the third one. You need about 15 to 20 minutes, just leave the dough covered into the tray. 20 minutes later and the dough is almost ready to go into the oven. Using the tips of your fingers, poke deep dents into the dough. Press until you touch the tray and make sure you do this all over the surface of the dough. Sprinkle a good amount of salt and don't forget to add some rosemary. That will definitely give you a better flavor. And in the end, you want to add some extra virgin olive oil in abundance. The focaccia absolutely loves it. The dough is going into the oven for about 20 minutes or until the focaccia is golden and cooked through. We're starting at 220 degrees Celsius, but halfway through we drop the temperature to 190 degrees Celsius. At this point, if you only wanted a homemade focaccia made from scratch, that's pretty much it. But if you want to bring this to a next level, then stay close. I know it's tempting, but just take it off the tray and place it on the rack for about 5 minutes to cool down slightly. Using a sharp bread knife, make some vertical cuts into the bread. Just make sure it don't go all the way through. This will allow us to insert all the ingredients that we want into the bread, mainly cheese. If you want to do diagonal cuts, that's absolutely fine, just make sure they crisscross one another. The first topping we're adding is the sun-dried tomatoes. Using a palette knife, try to get as much as possible into the cuts. But don't worry, if there is any outside, that's absolutely fine. That's flavor too. Now we are following the cheese and today's choice is Smoked Scamorza. This cheese is very similar to mozzarella and it's Italian by the way. And don't worry if you don't have any of these, even cheddar will do. Cut the cheese into slices and insert it into the cuts. Pretty much the same story as with the sun-dried tomatoes. The chopped red onion is next, and last but not least is the diced smoked sausage. Before it goes into the oven, we are brushing this with a good amount of garlic butter. But probably you don't want to use it all, it's a bit too much to be honest, but don't worry, you can keep it into the fridge and it can last for a couple of days easily. Transfer the focaccia into a tray. Get this in the oven at 200 degrees Celsius for about 5 minutes or until the cheese is properly melted. Once out the oven, serve immediately, with friends, with family, and just enjoy. And if you actually enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, check other videos on my channel, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time. You keep watching, and I'll keep cooking.